Welcome back to A Moment in History. I'm 𝙎𝙐𝘽𝙎𝘾. Well, in Europe, the hinge point between the Old World, and that's the ancient and medieval ages, and the modernism that we live in today is what historians call the Renaissance, and that's a period of rediscovery and rebirth. More accurately, this refers to the rediscovery of the classical period of history that, at least in the West, many believe had been lost during the 1,000-year medieval period. So this time period was highlighted by the arts, and several artists would dominate the landscape of Europe with their works, which stand up today as some of the most beautiful works of art in the entire world. Possibly the most famous of these men was an Italian painter and sculptor by the name of Michelangelo 𝙎𝙐𝘽𝙎𝘽𝙎. Now, Michelangelo was born in 1475 in the Papal States of Florence in Italy. His familial lineage was somewhat lower nobility, but he was not overtly esteemed on the societal ladder before entering prominence as the brilliant Renaissance artist that he would be as a young man. Now, he would become the preeminent Roman Catholic artist of his day, serving the Italian noble family that would come to dominate the papacy during the Renaissance, and that's, of course, the Medici family. Historians believe he always thought of himself more as a sculptor than a painter, but history shows us that he was equally skilled at both. His most famous painting would cover the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel in New St. Peter's Basilica. And that's, of course, perhaps the most famous church in all of Christendom, and you should check that out in another moment in history, by the way. At the behest of the Medici Pope Julius II, Michelangelo meticulously painted the scenes on the ceiling of the Palace of New St. Peter's, scenes that depicted the most important accounts of the biblical narrative. And that includes the creation of man and the genealogy of Jesus Christ. Now, one of the most important aspects of Renaissance art is the humanistic emphasis, and Michelangelo made a name for himself during this, depicting God the Father and God the Son in very human ways, which had largely been avoided in the Christian arts during the Middle Ages. Now, one other aspect of Michelangelo's art style was his fusion of Christian art with that of classical paganism, found in ancient Rome, of course, and this is why many of his pieces have the look of Greco-Roman works, even if they depict biblical figures and biblical events. So it's difficult to determine his most famous sculptings, but two stand out. One is the Pieta from 1498, which shows Mary holding the dead body of Jesus Christ after the crucifixion, and the other is David, completed in 1504. This famous work depicts young David just before his battle with Goliath, and it's a work many have called the complete picture of the Platonic man, depicting the ideal picture of humanism that was popular in the Renaissance. Michelangelo spent considerable time in his life and his career serving the Medici popes, as we said earlier, both Julius and his successor Leo X, and this is of course the same Leo who the Protestant reformer Martin Luther would clash during his life. Another moment in history, you should check that one out. Now, some believe Michelangelo was homosexual based on his seeming interest in the male form in his art, but there's not enough evidence for this. He lived a very long life for his time, dying in 1564 in Rome, just weeks before his 89th birthday. Thanks so much for joining me once again for A Moment in History. If you enjoyed this video, remember to like and subscribe, and if you want us to cover one of your favorite moments in history, you can tell us in the comments. Now stay tuned for some new content.